Welcome to NC Tweener Talks, powered by NC Idea, a weekly podcast by builders for builders, where we explore the startup journey from the idea to the exit and all the lessons in between, with an exclusive focus on founders from North Carolina. Now, here's your host, serial founder and general partner of the NC Tweener Fund, Scot Wingo.
First, a huge thank you to our gold sponsors. Today, we are featuring Robinson Bradshaw. With national reach and deep triangle ties, Robinson Bradshaw delivers high-touch, sophisticated legal counsel to emerging growth companies and venture investors. We'd also like to recognize our silver sponsors. Today, we are featuring Bank of America. Bank of America's transformative tech group provides the stability and scalability that tech companies need to rapidly grow today and into the future. Thank you again to all of our sponsors for supporting Triangle Tweener Talks and the entire Triangle startup community. It takes an ecosystem to build a thriving community, and sponsors like these are very valuable, and they contribute their time and also help sponsor things like the Triangle Tweener Talks and Triangle Tweener Times. Thank you. Welcome to this episode of North Carolina Tweener Times. Back in November of 2024, I had a very detailed conversation with Jess Lipson about his background. So definitely check that out if you want to get the deeper story on Jess's background. He's one of the Triangle's top serial founders who is currently building Levitate.ai. Jess sold his first startup, ShareFile, to Citrix, and then, while at Citrix, continued to not only run ShareFile and grow it to ultimately became a billion-dollar company that was bought by Progress, I believe, software. He also ran a bunch of Citrix's other software as a service businesses. So that whole portfolio, he became like the VP at Citrix that ran all the SaaS products. Now he is building a later stage SaaS company here in the AI era, which is definitely challenging, which a lot of you have expressed. We have documented these challenges on the Tweener Times. Sometimes this is called SaaSageddon or SaaSpocalypse or SaaSpocalypse, whatever clever name you want to come up with there. Back in February 10th, we put a piece out that was one of our most popular pieces about here's what's going on and here's what you can do today. And that was very well received, and it's still one of the top topics we get from most of the software folks in North Carolina, because the majority of them are software as a service companies. I was recently reading something that Jess put out, and he had a very interesting take on how they're thinking about this at Levitate. And I said, hey, if we could take out the Levitate details in here, is this something you would share with other founders? Being the gracious person he is, he said, sure. So we hopped on a pretty quick, but I think high impact conversation here. In this conversation, Jess gives an update on what he's seeing in the SaaS apocalypse. And then he introduces two factors that are really starting to separate companies within there. So there's a lot of throw out the baby with the bathwater that happened, and now I think there's starting to be a separation. And he talks about what is causing that separation. And if you understand that, then you can start to lean into that, steer your company into it, and come out of this better on the other side. I introduce a third one here, and I think you should think about that too. So I think you're going to find this pretty helpful, because not only are these three things measurable and you should kind of understand them pretty quickly, but there's something you can do. I hate stuff that's not actionable. So this is both strategic and tactical. So enjoy this conversation with Jess Lipson. I hope it helps you deal with the SaaS apocalypse. Welcome to this episode of North Carolina Tweener Talks. I am joined by Jesse, aka Jess Lipson. He is the founder and CEO of Levitate, serial entrepreneur, world famous in the Triangle. If you want to learn more about his background, we did a very long, awesome episode, one of my favorites. Jess, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, this was a on-demand type thing where we're fortunate to be a very small investor in Levitate at Tweener Fund, and Jess sent out a really good update. All his updates are chef's kiss. I always enjoy seeing what another operator is doing at your level. I learn a ton from how you do things.
Yeah.
And In there, you addressed the SaaS apocalypse, and that is one of the most frequently asked questions and concerns we get from fellow founders in the Triangle and the rest of North Carolina. So Jess graciously agreed to come on and walk us through a couple of his thoughts here. Jess has been thinking about SaaS since his company ShareFile was one of the very early SaaS companies. We had ChannelAdvisor, you had ShareFile. At that point, we had like Omniture and Salesforce.com. So there was not a lot of SaaS companies out there. I remember everyone was excited when this thing called the magic number came out. We spent a lot of time thinking about that. Now that seems archaic based on all the data we look at. So you think a lot about this. And then when you're at Citrix, you took over that company eventually traded for $1 billion. So you had like a lot of different models underneath your purview. So you've thought about this not only from ShareFile and Levitate, but all the other things. Mm-hmm. So you that's a long way of me saying I have a feeling you know what you're talking about.
Yeah. No, it's been a dynamic time in the last year or so. I think so like you said, Scott, I prepared just a couple slides that I talked about in my latest investor update, and I'll spend less time on this particular slide, and then there's just really one more. But I think that, like you said, Scott, there's so much FUD and swirl in the world of SaaS, and as an operator of software companies, there's so many articles that are published about kind of how to operate in this world of AI and what are the 12, 14, 15 different things you need to be thinking about with your moats and things like that. And I have been spending a lot of time over the last year, especially the last 6 months, thinking about this as an operator of a SaaS business that has almost 9,000 customers and over 300 employees. And I kind of, in this a couple slides, just boil things down and make them a lot simpler, I think, in terms of the way that I think most SaaS companies need to be kind of thinking about their business. So the first thing, just to set the table on this, which I think most people listening to this are aware of, but multiples have collapsed for SaaS companies over the last year. This was, I think I made this slide a couple of weeks ago, so the numbers have moved around a little bit, but they haven't really changed materially. But essentially, public SaaS multiples have been more than cut in half in the last year. I think now SaaS kind of revenue multiples are trading below the overall S&P 500. And so I pulled out some names here. Part of that is showing a couple examples of what you would think of as really durable systems of record, like Salesforce and Workday. No one's people say no one's going to vibe code their own HRIS, but Workday's still down 54%. And, you have Salesforce, HubSpot. They've been, severely impacted over the last year in terms of valuation. And then, the last three I kind of pulled out more because they're small business focused companies, Klaviyo and Monday as well, that are down 50+%. So I think the overall takeaway is multiples are down a lot. I won't spend time in explaining all the reasons why multiples are down, although it's also worth pointing out that over the last 4 years, SaaS multiples have come down quite a bit, and SaaS growth rates have also come down quite a bit. So if you do kind of a growth rate adjusted multiple, the effect is not as severe. But I think in the last year, this compression that we've seen over the last year is much more driven by investors' outlook on AI and how kind of traditional SaaS is going to be impacted by AI. A good kind of segue into the next slide is just that if you look at Salesforce, HubSpot, these are companies that are doing a lot when it comes to AI. Salesforce has Agentforce. They're making huge pivots towards AI enabling their business. HubSpot is doing a lot. And so I think one of the biggest takeaways, if you are a SaaS founder, is you should not be proud of the fact that you are building a lot of AI features. All these companies are building a lot of AI features and they're getting crushed. And so having AI features in your product is kind of absolute table stakes and kind of malpractice, if you're not doing it in your product. But that is not enough. And that's what investors are saying is that is absolutely not enough to be sparing you from the SaaS apocalypse. So, I think that if you are just in the camp of, I'm a SaaS company and I'm building a lot of AI features and my engineering team is using a lot of AI and they're getting a lot more productive, that probably puts you into, in the best case, this bucket with a HubSpot and Salesforce and Monday, where you're thinking about maybe a 3x to 6x multiple of revenue. If you're doing that as table stakes. If you're growing really slow and you're not even doing that, then maybe it's even worse. But it's important not to kind of fool yourself into thinking that just because you got some AI stuff going, that you're going to be looked at any differently than these companies here.
Yeah. And I remember when I met Brooks, you were doing ShareFile. You were her boyfriend doing ShareFile. And so that was 99, around 98. So you've been at this a while.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the lowest you've seen SaaS multiples?
Probably. I mean, I can't remember in 2008 kind of where they were. At the time, ShareFile was, we actually didn't feel the financial crisis in ShareFile if you looked at our growth rate, because we were kind of a time-saving tool. But 2008 was the last time I really remember it being like this. I don't know if it was quite this bad.
Yeah, my memory is they were a bit resilient because of recurring revenue. They were almost like, they weren't they weren't popping, but they were muted compared to the rest of the market. Yeah.
I think the other thing to point out is the investment landscape. Like even in 2008, I feel like if you had a good SaaS company that was growing, there was still some interest. I think there's very little interest in SaaS investment right now, especially if you're a subscale company, say 10 million or below, and you're not tripling. I think it's very, very difficult to find any investor who's interested in SaaS businesses, which that I haven't really ever seen before.
So we're seeing it at Tweener Fund where it's percolating down into valuations. A lot of founders will go to market thinking they're going to get 8 to 10, and the term sheets come back and kind of in that, the public markets have definitely rolled downhill pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is kind of the really simple couple of tests that I have used at Levitate, and I think are really important for founders to consider. The first one, this is coming from, I didn't invent these. I think there's a couple of analysts that have talked about similar concepts, but these are the two that resonated with me the most. This one I call the removal test, which is basically, if you take the AI out of your product, does it still function at all? And so if you think about, Cursor, I guess yesterday, just getting acquired by SpaceX for $60 billion. Cursor, without AI, it's nothing. The product doesn't run without AI. So it passes the removal test, you could say, or fails the removal test, however you want to phrase it. Let's just say it passes the removal test, meaning if you remove the AI, it's unusable as a product. So kind of bolt-on AI features are great, AI upsells are great, but they don't push you to passing this removal test. And so the companies that are really thriving and kind of being favored by investors are the companies that do pass this test. They are AI native in the sense that without AI, the product doesn't exist. And so I think this is a really good framing for founders to think about is, do we pass this test today? How could we pass this test? What would we have to do to make AI so centered to our value prop that without it, the product doesn't make any sense? And this is particularly tough for SaaS businesses that are pre-AI. Levitate, we've been around for 8 years. So we couldn't pass this test until 2 years ago because we would have been completely out of business. In fact, when I started the business, we were called Levitate.ai back in 2017, but the technology just wasn't there. So this is one important frame. And then the second one is much simpler, which is just growth direction. Are you accelerating? Is your growth re-accelerating or accelerating, or is it decaying? And what I've seen is, I think investors are much more focused these days on the acceleration of growth rate rather than absolute growth rate. I would argue that a company that was growing 10% in 2025 and now is growing 30% in 2026 will be seen more favorably from a valuation perspective than a company that was growing 100% in 2025 and 40% in 2026, because investors will look at the latter and say, well, clearly they are not benefiting from AI. They are maybe getting negatively impacting from AI, and the former company, it looks like they're truly benefiting from AI. So if AI spending is growing 50+% a year, which is what the estimates are, if your business is not growing at least at the rate of AI spend, then you're not really catching that wave.
Yeah. All right. I have a question, but I'll hold it till the end. Let's see.
Yeah. Well, that's it.
Okay. I thought there was another slide. All right. I guess I can answer now. That is the end. Yeah. I've seen, and maybe this is PE shops, but I've seen there's several companies that are kind of like entertaining M&A, and the acquirers and are really picking through churn, and they're trying to understand, what the red flag. This is probably maybe your third indicator. If you have any churn from vibe coding, then that freaks people out, because and in our portfolio, I'm a big Levitate user in both companies. So it's not something I would turn off. But so that's nice that you're, number one, CRMs are somewhat insulated, I believe, because you're the source of truth, or the record of truth, or source of whatever it is. But then number two, you uniquely, because you're selling to SMBs, like, let's say, I know you have verticals like legal, finance, nonprofit, and a bunch of those. There's not many people, that even have the confidence, kind of like even vibe code, anything, if not, something as complicated as this is going to be my customer rails that I'm going to build my business on, or do a social media post or run my blog or something like that. But the ones we see a lot of churn on are things like, let's say you're using a Zendesk, or there's a customer with a K, which was bought by Facebook, and they've just let it atrophy. It's like a ticketing system, and it has like 8,000 features, but people are just using like one of those features. So we're seeing that one's like we've seen many portfolio companies just vibe code away that, just implement their own basic ticketing simple system. And then a lot of people say, well, isn't the old data trapped? Well, they didn't write agents to go extract that old data. And there's some ways to get some of it out. So we've seen some things are exposed, but others aren't. And it's kind of what the software does and its importance, and how hard it is to build, and how much you're using of it. And then the other one is like the type of the customer.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I think probably the churn part ends up showing up in the growth, acceleration or deceleration, but it could be definitely an early indicator.
It's like the third order. Your third derivative.
Our hope is, I think that, one way to think about it on the vibe coding side, which I think is only one of the risks that that AI brings, is there's always been a buy versus build decision, when it comes to software. I think the equation has now changed, now that building an internal piece of software is maybe 10x or 100x cheaper. That's going to shift the buy versus build equation compared to the past. I know for our company, which we're a software business, we have engineers, but we've replaced a lot. We replaced a software that was similar to Gong that, probably would have cost us $100K, this year, that's gone. We're replacing our customer support system for two reasons. One, because of cost savings, but two, oftentimes if you build something custom in your company, it's actually much better and much more tailored to and integrated into your other systems. So that, I think our hope with the fact that we focus on micro SMB is the cost benefit analysis. Well, if you're only spending a few $100s on something per month, that's, a lot different than if you're spending a few $1,000s a month in terms of the number of hours that you would take on kind of that DIY kind of decision. So I think the DIY is maybe a little bit less present in the very small businesses. But that being said, I think, I was talking to somebody recently, and they were mentioning that they were considering, they're using a lot of Claude to access their CRM system, and they're considering just getting rid of the CRM system and backing it with like a Google Sheet, because Claude is the main interface. And so, hey, that may work, And so I think when Claude is the main single pane of glass, all the other stuff, is kind of devalued.
Have you guys thought of going, I know Salesforce did a big headless announcement where they are offering an MCP server. I got to imagine your customers probably aren't beating you over the head for it. But
they aren't beating us over the head, but we did release an MCP server. And so we do have it, and we're trying to actually push that to our customers. We're also doing a really big revamp of our API, just because we don't want customers to pick another product just because it works better with Claude, or maybe we have the MCP, but they don't know we do, and they go pick something else. We have, there's a customer of ours who uses another product that I won't mention, that is a file sharing product. And they were saying, hey, like, do we have to spend $20,000-$30,000 to migrate off this product because we can't use it with Claude, And so it's a product that has an API, but no MCP server. And so they're thinking about ripping and replacing the whole thing. We ended up
You should get back in the game.
Yeah. Well, we ended up building an MCP server for that product for them, even though the company itself doesn't have one, just to help them out with some other new product offerings that we're working on. But yeah, it is very real. And that's why I think, with these two indicators, especially the removal test, it's really a way to challenge ourselves to do more, because I think it's easy to be, and I'm on a couple boards, and I'm sure you're on a lot, you're exposed to way more than me, but every meeting I'm in, people come up and talk about how they're using Claude Code a lot in the company, and out in all the departments, and engineers are using it, and all the new AI features they're building. So I think it's kind of, a year ago, that would have been something to pat yourself on the back for, about, but today it's like everyone's doing it. You're not going to get a premium valuation for doing that.
No. Yeah. How about, so how does, without specifics, how does Levitate pass these tests?
Yeah. So we've got a couple things cooking, as you probably saw in the investor update, but there's some AI functionality that we're going to be rolling out in Q2 that we think will finally get us to the point where we could make sales to customers with that, as those features as the core of why they're buying, versus, hey, this is a nice way to have a little AI assistant inside Levitate that you can chat and make it easier in natural language to do X, Y, and Z, to be much more kind of core to the product. And then we have a new offering that we're piloting, that we haven't announced publicly yet, but we're really excited about it. Basically, the general idea is, we've seen all these micro SMBs, and they're aware of Claude and ChatGPT, and they're chatting with it and doing a little bit, but they still, we feel, need help with implementing AI in their business in a way that will truly transform their productivity in the same way that it has for us. And so, one of the big advantages we have with Levitate is we have a great distribution engine to reach tens of thousands of small businesses and, help them implement AI. And so we see that as a huge growth area for ourselves. And so I think that overall, there's a lot of talk in the market about services and software, and that seems to me to be the most durable combination going forward, because if you are just a pure software product, you kind of have to sleep with one eye open for the next many, many years, because breakthroughs in AI could disrupt you. But if you're, I think the key is to find a way where, another test that I didn't put on this document is past kind of the thought experiment of, there's a new advancement in Anthropic or OpenAI's models, and you wake up and you're excited about that because it's actually going to make your business do better, not you live in fear of what they might release and how that could possibly impact your business.
The fear index. Yeah. Or sleepless night index. Mm-hmm. I like, I think it's called Ask Lev, but in their campaign creator, I'll start it in some other thing where I just draft it real quick, and then I'll splat it in, and I'll have that go improve it for me. And it always does a really good job. So, you've done a good job sprinkling stuff throughout there. I like it. It's it's not, some people are like a little too aggressive with it where you can't get it to go away.
Yeah.
It's kind of like clippy. It's just kind of like, let me get to my mouse. So you guys have done a good job on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Just appreciate you taking time. You always are supporting, I didn't mention it, but Raleigh Founded is one of the big ways you give back to the community. Always appreciate you being able to share some thoughts with other founders. And thanks for coming on, and have a great day.
Yeah,
keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah, we'll do. Thanks, Scott.
Triangle Tweener Talks is hosted by Scot Wingo, presented and produced by Triangle Tweener Fund, with creative assets and design support from our friends at Walk West. That's it for today's episode. A big thank you to our guests, sponsors, and the team that makes this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves the startup stories coming out of the Triangle. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time on Triangle Tweener Talks.